SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්. SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්.
In your headlines tonight, till the very end, protesters continue to occupy key locations in Colombo after prompting the resignations of 5 cabinet ministers. Sooner rather than later, US State Department urges Sri Lankan authorities to implement solutions quickly to restore stability to the country. Get the house in order. The IMF hopes for Sri Lanka's situation to be resolved in order to move forward with the bailout talks. Ending the wait, shipment of 3,700 metric tons of domestic LP gas arrives in Sri Lanka today. More stocks due with a promise to end queues. Worries at bay. India hands over 44,000 metric tons of urea fertilizer while reassuring support to Sri Lanka until stability. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Sunday the 10th of July 2022.
නව ලයිෆ් බොයි කොහොම ස්වභාවික කොහොම සාරය සමග හානිකර පැරබන් රහිතයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Welcome to AdaDerana English News. I'm Indivari Amuatha. Calm and quiet prevailed over the streets of Colombo today, a day after an unprecedented mass protests demanding a regime change swept over key posts in the financial capital of Sri Lanka. Following the turmoil, the president said he will resign on the 13th of July. That's this Wednesday, while Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said he is willing to leave office. After breaching key positions in Colombo, protesters continue to occupy key locations, staying overnight at the president's official residence, the presidential secretariat, and even opening the premier's official residence, the Temple Trees, to the general public. The National Hospital of Sri Lanka, meanwhile, confirmed that out of a total of 113 admitted with injuries yesterday, 25 are currently receiving treatment, with one of them in critical condition.
The 9th of July will go down in the books of Sri Lankan history as the day the largest anti-government protests comprising thousands of Sri Lankans gathered in unison, demanding the resignations of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, and an entire system change. In an unprecedented move, protesters bypassed barricades and police intervention to breach the entrance of the president's official residence, then the presidential secretariat, and eventually the Prime Minister's official residence, the Temple Trees. Visuals of protesters who seized control of the president's house showed them walking through hallways, entering bedrooms, using its gymnasium, occupying official space, and even swimming in the president's pool. The president's house was occupied by protesters throughout the night, and they continue to remain at the premises with the presence of security forces personnel. In a video of the protesters coming across a bundle of money at the official residence of the president was circulating on social media today. The protesters stated that the money was accounted for and handed over to the Fort police station. In the meantime, crowds that breached the presidential secretariat too stayed at the building overnight. Meanwhile, the protesters at the Golface Green had taken steps to relocate a public library set up at the Golface protest site into the presidential secretariat building. Many people continued to flock to the presidential secretariat today as well. The Premier's official residence in Kolpeti, the Temple Trees, was also not left untouched by the protesters. Last night, a group of people who had entered the premises caused damages to the property at the Temple Trees. This morning, protesters had also painted on the wall outside the Temple Trees that it was open to the public. Many people continued to walk in and out of the premises, with some even preparing meals at the garden. In the meantime, police and other security personnel tried to restore barricades broken down by the protesters. In other developments, one patient remains in critical condition at the National Hospital of Sri Lanka after sustaining a head injury yesterday. Two others who sustained injuries had undergone surgery. According to the director of the National Hospital of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kumara Wickramasinghe, out of a total of 113 who were admitted to the hospital yesterday for treatment, only 25 currently remain in their care.
Several ministers resigned from their cabinet portfolios yesterday and today following tensions as a result of the mass protest. Business magnate Dhammika Pereira, who was sworn in as the Minister of Investment Promotion 16 days ago, was also among those who resigned.
Following the mass protest that erupted in Colombo yesterday, several ministers resigned from their cabinet portfolios after attending an emergency party leaders meeting. It was decided during the discussion chaired by the Speaker that President and Prime Minister must resign. It was decided that an all-party government should be immediately established and the Speaker be appointed as the acting President for a maximum period of 30 days. Prime Minister Ranil Wickramasinghe immediately said that he will step down, making way for an all-party government. Meanwhile, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa offered to step down on Wednesday, the 13th of July. Then, Dr. Bandula Gunawardena said he will resign from his portfolios of Transport and Mass Media Minister. In a statement published on his official Facebook page, Gunawardena said he would withdraw from his Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna membership as well. Gunawardena stated that he would, however, continue to serve as an independent Member of Parliament. Later yesterday, Minister of Tourism Harin Fernando and Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment Manusha Nanayakara, who joined the government from the opposition Samagi Janabalawegya, also resigned from their portfolios. Meanwhile, this morning, SLPP's National List MP and business magnate Dhammika Pereira tendered his resignation as Minister of Investment Promotion. In a letter addressed to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today, he said that Sri Lanka should expedite to identify and implement a solution that will achieve economic stability and address the needs of the people of the country. In the meantime, Mahinda Amaraveera said today that he will resign from his portfolio of agriculture and wildlife after accepting a consignment of fertilizer from India.
The United States urged Sri Lankan authorities to work quickly to implement solutions to achieve long-term economic stability and address the people's discontent regarding the worsening economic conditions. A spokesperson for the United States State Department said Washington is closely following the developments here in Sri Lanka. The spokesperson also said that the US condemns any violence against peaceful protesters and journalists, adding that the Sri Lankan people have the right to peacefully raise their voice and therefore they call for the full investigation, arrest and prosecution of anyone involved in any protest-related violence incidents. The department urged the government of Sri Lanka or any new constitutionally selected government to work quickly to identify and implement solutions that will achieve long-term economic stability and address the Sri Lankan people's discontent over the worsening economic conditions, including power, food and fuel shortages. Further, the United States also called on the Sri Lankan Parliament to approach this juncture with a commitment to the betterment of the nation, not any one political party. Indian External Affairs Ministry says that India stands with the people of Sri Lanka as they seek to realize their aspirations for prosperity and progress through democratic means and values, established institutions and constitutional framework. In a statement, Indian Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said that they are continuously following the recent developments in Sri Lanka, maintaining that India is Sri Lanka's closest neighbour. The External Affairs Ministry of India said that they extend unprecedented support of over $3.8 billion for the serious economic situation in Sri Lanka. Earlier in the day, India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said that India has been providing assistance to Sri Lanka and is monitoring the developments here, adding that there is no refugee crisis now. The International Monetary Fund, meanwhile, says it is closely monitoring the ongoing developments in Sri Lanka and hopes for a resolution of the current situation, allowing for bailout talks to continue. The IMF once again reaffirmed their commitment to support Sri Lanka at this difficult time, in line with its policies.
Issuing a statement, the IMF said that they are deeply concerned about the impact of the ongoing economic crisis on the people, particularly the poor and vulnerable groups. IMF said that it will continue technical discussions with its counterparts at the Ministry of Finance and Central Bank of Sri Lanka. The global lender called for a resolution for political turmoil that will allow a resumption of dialogue on an IMF-supported program. Sri Lanka commenced talks with the global lender in April this year and followed up on virtual mission from 9 to the 24th of May to secure what would be the island's 17th IMF rescue program. On the 20th of June, an IMF delegation arrived in Sri Lanka to begin in-person talks with Sri Lankan authorities. The mission continued until June 20th. Upon conclusion of visit, the IMF staff team said talks with Sri Lankan authorities made significant progress. The Prime Minister also told Parliament recently in a special statement that Sri Lanka's negotiations with the International Monetary Fund were fruitful but more complex and difficult than before because Sri Lanka is a bankrupt nation. In order to assist the process, Sri Lanka has appointed Lazard, which has handled debt talks for dozens of crisis-strained countries in recent years, and law firm Clifford Chance to renegotiate the island's debts. Representatives from Lazard and Clifford Chance are currently working on Sri Lanka's debt sustainability report, which the Prime Minister believes would be submitted to the IMF in August.
Chief of Defence Staff General Shavendra Silva, meanwhile, called on the people to extend their fullest support to maintain peace in the country. In a statement to media following yesterday's chaotic turnout of events, the Defence Chief appealed to the general public to comply with security forces and the police.
රටේ ඇතිවී තිබෙන අර්බුදකාරී වාතාවරණය සාමකාමීව සහ ව්‍යවස්ථානුකූලව නිරාකරණය කර ගැනීම සඳහා අවස්ථාවක් උදා වී ඇති මේ මොහොතේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවාසී ජනතාවගෙන් අපි ඉල්ලා සිටිනු ලබන්නේ රටේ සාමය පවත්වාගෙන යාම සඳහා ආදරණීය ශ්‍රී ලංකාවාසී ජනතාවගේ සහයෝගය ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදා සහ පොලිසිය වෙත ලබා දෙන ලෙසයි.
And an update on yesterday's event of PM's residence being torched after this break.
Big 3.
Welcome back to the news. Police today handed over the investigation that is currently underway into the arson of Prime Minister's house to the Criminal Investigations Department. Meanwhile, 3 of the suspects that had been arrested in connection with the attack have been ordered to be remanded until the 20th of this month.
Protests were rife in multiple key locations in Colombo yesterday, with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's official and private residence becoming a hotspot of agitation. Just as the Premier's official residence, the Temple Trees, was breached by the protesters, his private residence down Inner Flower Road in Colombo 7 was stormed by the protesters. Despite the best efforts of security personnel to disperse the people that continued to gather and agitate outside the PM's private residence using tear gas and water cannons, the efforts were futile. During this, a few journalists, including AdaDerana's regional correspondent, was attacked by the security forces. With the injured journalist receiving treatment at the National Hospital, police media spokesperson SSP Nihal Taldova said that the Inspector General of Police has instructed for disciplinary action to be taken against the security personnel who carried out the assaults. Soon after, the undeterred protesters outside the Premier's residence was seen scaling the wall of his private residence and making their way into the house. Not long after, the PM's house was on fire. With this being the case, the police had proceeded to arrest 3 suspects inside the Premier's residence, believed to have caused the fire. Among the 3 arrested suspects are a 19-year-old from the area of Mount Lavinia, while the other 2 suspects were identified as residents of Kadawata and Gaul areas, aged 24 and 28 respectively. The 3 suspects arrested over the incident of setting fire to the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's private residence in Colombo have been remanded until the 20th of July by the 4th Magistrates Court. Meanwhile, the police stated that the investigations into the incident have been handed over to the Criminal Investigation Department today. The situation that ensued the arson of the premises was a grim observance, as the residence housed a priceless collection of books and other antiquities over the generations.
On a positive note, state-owned Litro Gas Lanka Limited received a shipment of 3,700 metric tons of liquefied petroleum gas this afternoon at its LPG cylinder refilling plant in Kerawalapitia. Earlier today, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa instructed officials to expedite the unloading and the distribution of domestic gas cylinders to the public as soon as the stock arrives in Kerawalapitia. Chairman of Litro Gas, Mudita Piris, said the distribution will begin on Tuesday on a regular and systematic manner, assuring that the shortages for domestic LP gas will no longer prevail in Sri Lanka.
A consignment of LP gas ordered by Litro Gas Lanka Limited arrived in Sri Lanka this afternoon, nearly a month since the state-owned domestic gas supplier received its last LPG shipment. The stock of 3,700 metric tons of LPG is part of a 100,000 metric ton consignment secured from an Oman gas supplier at $90 million. In a statement, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has instructed officials to expedite the unloading and distribution of domestic gas as soon as the vessel arrives in Kerawalapitia. Chairman of Litro Gas Lanka Limited, Mudita Piris, said that distributions starting from July 12th will be regular and systematic. Litro said that a second shipment of 3,740 metric tons is scheduled to arrive tomorrow. Earlier last week, Chairman of the state-owned supplier said that a third cargo of 3,200 metric tons would reach Sri Lanka between the 15th and the 17th of July. More shipments are due in the island on the 20th, 22nd, 25th, 27th and 29th of this month. Speaking to AdaDerana earlier, he assured that gas queues can be ended by the beginning of August once these shipments are received.
Lanka Indian Oil Company today resumed fuel distribution to its refilling stations from LIOC Trincomalee terminal. Lanka IOC, the country's only private sector fuel supplier and the only supplier currently to vehicles of non-essential service, said that its terminal in Trincomalee will operate 24 hours to distribute fuel stocks to its refilling stations island-wide. Yesterday, LIOC suspended fuel distribution to filling stations, taking the mass protest organised in Colombo into account. However, the company's terminals in Trincomalee remained open and continued their supply to the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and all industries. Now, the consignment of 44,000 metric tons of urea fertilizer from India was officially handed over to Sri Lanka by the Indian High Commissioner in Colombo. Addressing media, the Indian envoy in Colombo, Gopal Bagle, said that India will continue to assist Sri Lanka towards economic recovery and stability.
Yesterday, Sri Lanka received a consignment of 44,000 metric tons of urea fertilizer secured under the Indian line of credit. The consignment was officially handed over to Minister of Agriculture Mahinda Amaravira by Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Gopal Bagle at his official residence India House in Colombo today.
කෘෂිකර්ම ශේෂ්ත්‍රයේ අපේ ගොවි ජනතාව විශාල බලාපොරොත්තු සහිතව හිටියා මේ යල්කන්නේම මේ පොහොර ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා එයට අවස්ථාව ලැබෙනවා ඒ වගේම මේ වන විට සැලසුම සකස් කරලා අවසానයි ටෙන්ඩර් වලටත් සූදානම්ෙන් සිටිනවා මහ කන්නයට අවශ්‍ය සියලු පොහොර ලබා දීම සඳහා ඒ සඳහා මූල්‍ය ප්‍රතිපාදනත් මේ වන විට ලැබිලා තිබෙනවා මේ මතාවේ අපි ලබා දෙන පොහොර වී වගාවටත් ඒ වගේම බඩිරුඟු වගාවටත් ප්‍රයෝජනවත් වෙනවා ඒ වගේම ඊට අතිරික්තව තේ ගොවීන් සඳහා මේ පොහොර ලබා දෙන්න ප්‍රමාණවත් පොහොර තොගයක් අපේ රටට ඉන්දියානු ණය යෝජනා
This denotes the support that India continues to extend to our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka at this time to look after their requirements and needs. I am very happy that this will particularly help the farmers and will also help the efforts of Sri Lanka to ensure food security of the citizens of Sri Lanka. As a friendly neighboring country, India will continue to be supportive of all efforts for the recovery of the economy and stability, as well as promoting political reconciliation within the frameworks of democracy and constitution.
Taking you to business news, Professor Emeritus in Sociology at the University of Colombo, Professor Siri Hettige, says that a need assessment should be conducted in order to identify vulnerable populations, which helps better allocate available resources. Speaking during our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, Professor Hettige said that borrowed money needs to be put into productive investment within the country, adding benefits to the economy in a sustainable manner.
There were clear signs of this crisis way back 20 years. The point is that when you have a widening trade gap, when your imports are far bigger than what you can export to pay for those imports. Now that is not something sustainable. And then borrowing money, you have to ask the fundamental question: why do we borrow money? You have to borrow money for productive investment. And if you don't invest, what you borrow in productive areas, you're going to have a huge problem because you're not adding anything to the economy in a sustainable way. So the point is that sustainable development model is there for us to really look at closely and then fashion our economic and social sectors accordingly, which we haven't done. We have so many opportunities when you look at all these things, but then we have not been able to really make use of those opportunities because we did not really have long-term strategy for development and public welfare. Today, we have the vast majority of the people being so vulnerable, and that is because we don't have adequate social protection measures built into our society, and as a result, a large proportion of the population remain vulnerable, and they have become more and more vulnerable over the last several years because of COVID initially, and then now with the present crisis and so on. So the point is that we need to really have a very different approach to economic development, public welfare, and then development in various sectors and so on and so forth, and then to make sure that our economy is balanced, our economy is not distorted as it is today. So the point is that these things have been discussed over time, but the fact of the matter is that in this country, decision making has been completely independent of those very thorough discussions that have taken place in this country in different institutions, then in different professional associations and groups and so on and so forth. Main problem is that we haven't done a needs assessment, and we have the capacity to do so. Our public administration running from Colombo right down to the village can really manage this. They can certainly do a needs assessment. In other words, we can set up community-based monitoring system so that we will generate real-time data so that we know how many families in this particular Grama Sevaka division are in need of support. How many children are there who are deprived of their basic necessities? How many elderly people? How many, let's say, people with chronic ailments and so on and so on and so forth. But the point is, we haven't really done that. And I think that is a fundamental requirement if you were to mobilize resources, both from within the country and from without. The point is, without really knowing exactly what you need, how can you mobilize resources?
That wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9, AdaDerana English News Service on AdaDerana 24. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.